What's up, family? I know it's been a long time coming. And yes, it's me, the same person that came up with the legendary Who is Yahweh, What is the Demiurge installment, and all the subsequent installments after that. And basically, I want to come to you all with, well, let me shout out with this. Let me start out with this quick shout out. Let me shout out all the subscribers, all the new subscribers, all the people that have been hitting me up via email or on the many installments that I have uploaded on YouTube, Facebook, etc., etc. I'd just like to say thank you, and I am really motivated to really dig deep and continue on with the studies. And basically, this installment is going to be like none other. I know I always say that on every installment. I know y'all would bear with me, but yeah. So I would just like to. This installment is titled, I don't know yet. Let me wait till I upload it to where I can really put a title to this. But basically, it has to do with consciousness. And like I've said before, I'll say it again, this isn't necessarily my information, but this is information that I've gained throughout the years from various people, from and let me name them too, actually. Ango Rose, Tom Campbell, Bobby Hemmett, etc., etc. This is an amalgamation of the information that I've received over the years that I've come to through experience, come to find out that it is truth. It is the truth. And with this installment, this is really like a one-stop shop as far as consciousness goes. And I really want to talk about consciousness. What is consciousness? What is this virtual reality matrix that we find ourselves in? Why we are here? What you're supposed to be doing while you are here? A lot of things. It deals with a lot. It deals with really a lot. It's just like an amalgamation of sorts. So basically, yeah. And just let me shout out again just the people that have paved the way and that have really inspired me to really push on and push through, and everybody along the way. I mean, there's so many people I can't even name them all. It take too long just to name everybody. But like I said, once again, this isn't necessarily my information, but this is information that I've come to find is the truth. So this is really what I've learned in this simulation called Earth while I'm down here for this brief period of time. And I don't know how long I'm going to be down here or what's going to transpire, but just to give you guys an update where I'm at right now. And I've had people email me and message me and say, well, okay, Brother Prodigy, how come you're waiting so long to upload another installment? Like, what's going on? What's the deal? Well, really, my life has been pretty hectic, and I've been living, from place to place, sojourning in this simulation, and I'm really on a learning experience. And I went through various jobs trying to maintain a living in the matrix, and I've been really preoccupied with a bunch of nothing but here it is. Here's another installment that I'm uploading specifically for my subscribers, and shout out to all the 1.5 people that have actually went out there and bought the book. Thank you. I love you all so much. And like I said, this is titled really what I've learned in this simulation called Earth. Okay. And it's not going to be over the top, or it's not anything overarching or anything like that. It's pretty much I'm going to try to like simplify it the best that I can, but from what I've experienced and what I've come to find out, there are two fundamental assumptions that exist. Okay. And that is that consciousness exists, and the consciousness that exists is fundamental to any real system. Evolution occurs through time at a fundamental level, in all virtual realities, and what doesn't evolve eventually goes extinct. Okay, we can see that. All right, so evolution at even a fundamental level is necessary for consciousness to grow. All right, pretty simple. And there are these are not specifically my fundamental assumptions, but there are two fundamental assumptions that I've tend to discover to be true to my reality frame. Okay, so there are two fundamental assumptions in this model. All right, and you need the equation of consciousness plus time equals evolution. All right, and I'm going to be using a lot of terms, and let me get it out the way now and describe them. Okay, when I say an IUOC, it's not my term, but it's a term coined by Tom Campbell, who was a disciple of Robert Monroe, who wrote a few books, Far Journeys, Journeys Out of the Body. He founded the what institute? He found, what was the name of the institute? The Institute for Studying Consciousness and Out-of-Body Experiences. Oh, the Monroe Institute. Okay, yeah. And this information is what I've learned from, Bob Monroe reading his books, Tom Campbell reading My Big Toe, Bobby Hemmett from his lectures that he did on consciousness and Yahweh and the demiurge, Angel Rose from her and her ability to tap into the Akashic records and get and receive revelations from the larger consciousness system. So when I say IUOC, I'm basically talking about the individuated unit of consciousness. Okay, it's a fancy acronym that basically means the individuated unit of consciousness. And it is that element of consciousness that lies outside of a given simulation. It is a subset of the larger consciousness system, which is really partitioned off in order to grow individually through various simulations, polarities, and so-called quote-unquote physical gender. So you have this individuated unit of consciousness, which is you at the being level, which incarnates into various simulations in order to grow, and it grows through the experience in these simulations, quote unquote, individually through polarity and quote unquote physical gender. So this individuated unit of consciousness, or what some call your higher self, or what some also call God, Allah, etc., etc., this incarnates into a simulation and it experiences individuality, polarity, and physical gender. So even if you are a male or a female, your IUOC is basically this aspect of consciousness that doesn't have a gender, because remember, gender is actually it deals with biology. And gender is only relevant when incarnating in a specific simulation. Okay. However, there is no gender outside of this given earthly simulation. All right. It's actually what exists is qualities of consciousness. And these qualities of consciousness are thus labeled as masculine and feminine. But when incarnated into a physical body, it takes the role of either a male or a female. Okay, and then which we classify as gender. All right, and when you even talk about things like transgender, homosexuality, those have to do specifically with biology and with the body, your genes, your genetics that you inherit from your parents. Okay. And when dealing with the topic of transgender or homosexuality, it has specifically everything to do with gender or biology and the genes and the code and the construct that you inherit from your mom or your dad. But that has nothing to do with the larger consciousness system. Doesn't care one way or the other about homosexuality, about transgenderism. Okay, it just because even if you are transgender or homosexual, you still can fulfill or grow in a given subset or a simulation. Now, excuse me. Another term that was not invented by me is called a free will awareness unit, FWAU rather. And a free will awareness unit, or your free will awareness unit, is an avatar within a given simulation that interprets that specific data stream. Okay, in this case of this earthly simulation, we operate along 5 to 6 sensory data streams, commonly called reality, in order for the IUOC or your higher self to grow vicariously through its various experiences. All right, now this free will awareness unit is the avatar within a given simulation. Now this free will awareness units, the free will awareness units are really the boots on the ground, so to speak, for the IUOC, that are outside or non-physical, which is outside of any given simulation. And IUOCs are the pieces of the puzzle making up the larger consciousness system as a whole, as it evolves towards love, which is a higher vibration than in relation to fear. Okay, there is no limit in relation to how perfect the aspect of love can be. Therefore, the larger consciousness system is a system of consciousness that continually evolves, decreasing elements of fear and ignorance and moving progressively towards love, which is the highest vibration. All right. Now, this IUOC, this individuated unit of consciousness, all right, which is, see, when talking about consciousness has a certain quality to it, depending upon its degree of entropy. And entropy, like if you've listened to my previous installments, entropy is the rate or the percentage of disorder within a given consciousness construct. All right. So one's quality of consciousness is the degree to which you, the IUOC, has evolved at the being level, not at the intellectual level, not at the ego level, does not involve your ego whatsoever. Okay, a high quality of consciousness equals a greater power to love. Okay, a low entropy consciousness, which is a low entropy consciousness, okay, which equals a higher quality of being, a higher spiritual quality. A low quality of consciousness equals a low capacity to love. A high entropy consciousness, which equals a low quality of being and a low spiritual quality. So a lot of people that exhibit hate, fear, the concept of lack and scarcity is an element of consciousness that operates along a low spiritual quality, which has a high entropy consciousness, okay, a low quality of being. Okay, now when I talk about entropy, entropy is basically a physics term which also deals with thermodynamics. All right, and consciousness evolves from one experience packet to the next experience packet, which many people commonly refer to as incarnation and reincarnation. Consciousness is an evolving collection of experience data, rules, patterns, memory, processing capability with a specific level of entropy, plus or minus, with plus equaling love and the negative equaling fear. All right, now the larger consciousness system must start with an IUOC to experience a said virtual reality, and I'll be going into this a little bit more. Okay, this installment is probably going to be a little bit long, so y'all just bear with me. Okay, each information packet or incarnation that consciousness experiences becomes a static model in the larger consciousness system. And those of you who are familiar with programming, data programming, are more familiar with static and dynamic models. Okay, static and dynamic models. All right. Now, when you incarnate and after you quote unquote die, or leave your physical avatar, then it becomes your avatar becomes a static model within the larger consciousness system. So people can then tap into that, or people that are able to tap into what's called the Akashic records can tap into that and receive information from your avatar, but the information that they receive is going to be based upon your static model. And what your static model is, basically after you physically die, your avatar, like I said, is stored in the larger consciousness system as a static model. So John Doe or Jane Doe, after you physically die, is stored in the larger consciousness system as a static model. When you're active in a simulation, quote unquote, living and breathing, you are dynamic, meaning you can make choices. You can make free will awareness choices. You have a decision space. But once you physically die, then that avatar no longer has, that avatar has a zero decision space. Okay, it makes zero choices, but it can be queried. That avatar, your avatar, Miss Jane Doe or Mr. John Doe, can be queried, and information can be gathered from that static model, but it is only based upon probability. So let's just say your Aunt Jane physically died, and you knew somebody excuse me, that was able to access these Akashic records. All right, this library of information and data. Okay, they might be able to access the information of your auntie or your grandma or your uncle or your grandfather, but the information that they receive from your relative is only going to be based upon probability, as what is the highest likelihood, or what would be the highest probability of that ancestor saying or answering a question that you would ask them. Okay, so moving forward, our consciousness, like I said, is a part of a larger consciousness system, or a construct. All right, now evolution in consciousness happens at the being level. It doesn't happen at the intellectual level. Time, along with awareness, is what's required to create consciousness. All right, human consciousness is just an IUOC with a human avatar. All right, operating in third density. All right, consciousness is restrained by the avatar and the rule set of the virtual reality. So your avatar would be your physical body, biology, genetics, DNA, etc., etc. Okay, the rule set of the virtual reality would be what we call laws, universal laws. Okay, or laws specific to this simulation, and this rule set thusly affects the virtual character. All right, like if you're playing Super Mario Brothers, the laws of that game would govern Mario and what he could do and what he couldn't do, and how far he could jump, and you know what happens that would allow him to physically die. Okay, now a virtual reality is necessary for consciousness to grow. And people say, well, why is that? Well, virtual realities are great because they can speed up the process of learning. All right, just like if you're a pilot and you go through a flight simulation. All right, you can, that's a way for you as a pilot or learning to fly to be able to learn how to fly an airplane without jeopardizing people on board. Okay, so a virtual reality is a simulation-based reality. It's a way in which you can learn from out of an environment and through an environment that minimizes danger, all right, and loss. Okay, and we are actually limited. Consciousness is actually limited by the avatar in ways that it can learn and interpret a given simulation. All right, and the unit of measure that we use to measure discrete chunks of time is called delta t, which is an equation. Okay, which is basically the refresh rate of the virtual reality system, averaging, and your average computing refresh rate is around 60 to 120 times a second. All right, and the speed of light, which is I can't remember. But the speed of light is the pinnacle or the apex or the limit in which information can be transferred within the simulation. So your speed of light, and while we seem like we can't go beyond that, is because that's the limit in relation to the transference of information. 120 some thousand miles per second or something like that. I can't remember. But the first, or one of the first virtual realities, was probably a developed way of communication or communicating between two things. All right, and there, out of necessity, there must be a server to also compute this reality that would have to exist outside of this virtual reality. So these things are really fundamental. Okay, there has to be something that excuse me, computes this reality, and that which computes this reality must, out of necessity, exist outside of this virtual reality. You can't have a server and a player. You can't have a server computing the reality and giving the information to the player while inside the game at the same time as the player being inside the game playing the game. Okay, that's common sense. All right. Now, just like, when you're playing Super Mario Brothers or any other video game, okay, the Nintendo, or the video game, the gaming console, cannot be within the game while computing the game, while playing the game, while the player is playing the game. You see what I'm saying? This logically does not make sense. Okay, so this isn't anything that's too far to grasp. All right, this is just basically common sense principles, which is really one of the highest sciences, which is common sense. So anytime you create a system with a rule set, you create a virtual reality. And usually experience is the best teacher. All right. And the limit of consciousness within the virtual reality depends upon the restraint of the rule set, or the strictness of the rules in the rule set. Okay. All right. Now, this virtual reality seems to me that it is a multiplayer game that is being rendered three-dimensionally to each player. And this player would be your IUOC, with each player receiving their own subjective data stream. All right. And in relation to anyone that is familiar with computer science, you know that a virtual reality cannot compute itself. So that which computes cannot compute itself unless it's in a digital format. Hence the reason why people draw the distinction between a higher and lower self. Your higher self is the player. Your lower self would be your avatar, or the one actually playing the game. All right. Being controlled by your higher self. So when you think the one that you think you are praying to, that guides you and leads you, is actually yourself, your higher self, your IUOC. All right. Your higher self is that which is computing the data and receiving meaning out of what's received, which is called information. All right. Your IOC is the one which is computing the data, or crunching the data and receiving meaning out of what is received. Okay. So here I must make I must distinguish between information and data. All right. Information and data. Information cannot be weighed. All right. Information is what consciousness is, the meaning that consciousness receives from its experience as an avatar within a given simulation. All right. So there seems to me there seems to be three components to any virtual reality. All right. A trinity. All right. Which is that which computes, which is the larger consciousness system, or that which is in the realm of the larger consciousness system, the virtual reality matrix itself, and consciousness itself. All right. Now, The placebo effect and the double slit experiment lets us really know that we live in a virtual reality that is based upon probability and statistical data. And what's most likely to happen will happen. All right, probability. A virtual reality based upon probability is also a very efficient virtual reality, and provides a certain consistency between players in the simulation. All right, this system seems to be it seems to me like it's an evolved probabilistic system, and one can influence the probability of events occurring with a median probability ratio. Okay, this is called a median probability ratio, which basically means you're biasing the outcome one way or the other off of the intent of the conscious observers by, a few percent. All right, and this collapses certain events into our reality out of, let's say, metaphorically speaking, a huge cloud or database of probability, or a database of probability stored in the cloud. You know what I'm saying? Either way. So in this system, in this virtual reality matrix, this system is a probabilistic system, meaning you can influence what happens within the system and to you and to others by your intent. Okay, the stronger your intent, the stronger your will, the higher the probability, the escalating probability of that which you intend to do or you will to do actually manifesting in your life in a real way, quote unquote. Okay. And this virtual reality called Earth has a tight rule set and provides you with immediate feedback in that of consequences to your actions. Okay, the whole thing, you reap what you sow principle. All right, you reap what you sow, which is a biblical concept, basically meaning that the choices that you make, the actions that you intend or exude have consequences to them. All right, there are consequences to your actions, and you have this virtual reality matrix, right? And within this virtual reality matrix, you have this whole you reap what you sow thing, meaning for every action there's a consequence. But depending upon where you live in the simulation, that would also depend upon the consequences that you receive. Like, so I've lived a lot of places in my in this short life span that I've been on, incarnated into the simulation, and I can tell you that certain cities are easier. The rule set is more lax. Okay, like let's just say if you live in the country, you might be able to get away with a little bit more, quote unquote. But let's just say if you live in a big city like Atlanta, then pretty much every action has an immediate consequence, and these consequences are hard hitting usually, and not just in Atlanta, but many cities are like that. Okay, many cities that you live in, you just can't just drive through the city at 100 miles an hour and expect nothing to happen. You might be able to do that in the country. You might be able to drive your car and go 100 miles an hour down a country road, without any recompense. Breaking the law, but you might not receive any recompense for that action. But if you're in the city, when there's more elements of consciousness, whenever you're around more free will awareness units, it also increases the rule set. It binds and strengthens the rule set. So there's a stricter rule set whenever you're around. You're going to experience a stricter rule set whenever you're around more elements of consciousness. Okay, so you might be able to drive through the country at 100 miles an hour with no recompense, but if you're in the city, you might be able to go 1 block without getting pulled over and taken to jail. That's because that city has a stricter rule set, because there's more elements of consciousness there. Okay, so the rule set is tightened by your policy enforcers, by your local government, state, federal, etc., etc. You see what I'm saying? So even within a given simulation, that simulation is not the same all across the board. You have pockets within a given simulation with that might contain a stricter rule set, or the rule set might not be as strict, giving your region or your locale within that given simulation, in which I'm specifically talking about Earth. Okay, so in this virtual reality, there's really a certain degree of uncertainty within this system, and this can allow consciousness to bias, like I said, a specific outcome. And probability is the likelihood of one or more events happening divided by the number of possible outcomes, or the number of favorable outcomes divided by the number of total outcomes. So the odds of me picking an ace of spades out of a 52 card deck is 1 in 52. Okay, which is around 0.19% or 19%. So you see, it's well, let me just skip to because everybody wants to know like the basic fundamental questions, right? So let me just really skip to the meat of the thing, right? What are we doing here? That's what everybody wants to know. Okay, what are we doing here? What the fuck are we doing here? All right, we are an individuated unit of consciousness with a mission to evolve the quality of our consciousness through interaction within a data set and along with others within this virtual reality. We are here to experience, interact, and to make choices. Now, what's the point? What's the point of this shit, right? As we evolve, the larger consciousness system evolves. Okay, so we are one and the same. So when people say we are all one, essentially that's true. This virtual reality, which is basically an entropy reduction trainer game. That's not my, I didn't come up with that. Tom Campbell came up with that. That's not, those aren't my words. Okay, this virtual reality entropy reduction trainer game. In this game, we are in this part, or we are a piece of the larger consciousness system's strategy to evolve. We are here to grow up and evolve ourselves along with the entire system. So the entire system is also evolving as well. Each various simulation is also evolving as well. IUOCs with a higher quality of consciousness, and therefore love, having a higher vested interest to this larger consciousness system, we are really important fundamentally to the larger consciousness system. Okay, and those IUOCs with the higher quality of consciousness have a higher vested interest to the larger consciousness system because they have been evolving longer and have had a broader experience base, more information packets, more incarnations, okay, more static models to query in relation to people who like to access the Akashic records. You see what I'm saying? Those that are lesser evolved tend to be more chaotic and disorganized. And this is not to say that the larger consciousness system loves some more than others, but ones with a larger experience base are pushed and chastened and chastised more than ones just starting out with a lower experience base. Okay, because they're pushed more to evolve, because they have more of a vested energy that's been infused or given to them. Okay, so how do we accomplish this evolution? How do we accomplish this evolution? All right, how do we accomplish this evolution? Stuff happens and we get to deal with it. How we choose to deal with it causes us to evolve or de-evolve. Okay, simple. It's a simple but profound statement. Okay, meaning de-evolution is basically degenerating into random bits of information, chaotic, you know. All right, and we tend to focus on the wrong end, meaning manipulating and controlling, or trying to, or staying preoccupied with trying to control the stuff that's happening, okay, rather than focusing on how we choose to deal with it. All right, there are in life, it's not always about how people treat you, it's more about how you treat others. Okay, all right, and how you treat others, because that is which you can control. All right, now if we I mean, when being aware and what we and being preoccupied with life and what's happening, that is in and of itself. And if we spend all our time trying to manipulate events and relationships to suit our needs and wants, which deals with fear and ego, it's ultimately going to be futile and frustrating. The only thing you have is the power to change yourself. The only thing that you have the power to change is yourself. Okay? See, each new challenge is an opportunity to evolve rather than something that needs to be controlled. So with each new challenge, you should look at it as an opportunity to evolve rather than looking at it as something that needs to be controlled or dominated. Okay? Now, why a virtual reality? Okay? Why a virtual physical matter reality? Why? The virtual reality allows us to exercise our free will through choice, and that's a train in the background. The virtual reality, or this virtual reality concept, allows us to experience our free will through choice. The virtual reality provides, or a virtual reality construct provides, let me just waiting for this train, because I think that this train is deliberately trying to get on my nerves. I mean, before I even started this installment, everything was fine. It was quiet. There were no trains going by. The sun was out. Now, as soon as I start doing this installment, now trains are going by, people are driving by, it's about to rain on me, etc., etc. So, okay, so I know, right? It's crazy. So, yeah, a virtual reality construct allows us to exercise our free will through choice, and we do have free will. Okay, this virtual reality construct provides a context that gives evolutionary significance to our free will choices. Okay, really? Okay, like I said, a virtual reality construct provides a context that gives evolutionary significance to our free will choices. Now, what the fuck does that mean? Okay, now let me talk about virtual realities, because the reason we can even go out of body or experience near-death experiences or recall past lives, etc., etc., is because we are consciousness experiencing what appears to be a physical virtual reality, meaning consciousness does not reside within the brain as what is commonly thought, but consciousness resides outside of what is considered to be the physical body. So let me just say that again, because a lot of people more out of all these concepts, I think this concept is what people miss the most, and what people really don't understand the most, right? Is the fact that consciousness does not reside within the brain as what is commonly thought, but consciousness resides outside of what is considered to be the physical body. And if you don't, if you need a source reference, you can read Tom Campbell's book, My Big Toe, which is an acronym for his theory of everything. And what he wants us to do is to get the information, consciousness to get the information. The data is there in the simulation in the form of a book. Okay, it is consciousness that gets the data and interprets that as information and gains a meaning from it. So it's just like if you're playing, he likes to use the metaphor of like Sims and World of Warcraft. Okay, if you're playing a video game, and that character in the video game is on the operating table, when the doctors perform, if the doctor is operating on that individual, when the doctor cuts that patient open in the video game, then you're going to see organs and a brain and, etc., etc. All right, that does not mean that there is actually consciousness within that body, within that video game, but it's just that in the simulation, when that character is cut open, then the system has to render something there. It can't be nothing. Nothing cannot be just seen. Okay, the system has to render data. So when you cut open the stomach, when you cut open somebody, you see like organs, intestines, kidneys, etc., etc. All right. which keeps with the consistency of the simulation. Okay, if I cut open the head of one character in the game and I see a brain, but if I cut open another character in the game and I see and I cut open another head of the character and I see a heart, that's inconsistent. Okay, that's inconsistent. Everything, which is that's also a law of the simulation, everything must be consistent. Okay, and what is the highest probable is that which will happen. Okay, so if you get a nail in your tire, there's a high probability that your tire is going to go flat pretty soon. All right, so if you get shot in the head as a character in the simulation, there's a high likelihood that you are going to physically die. Okay, but that only has bearing within the simulation. That has nothing to do with the player playing the game, because the consciousness playing the game is just going to say, okay, well, they're going to log out and play a different character. It's just like a racing game, like if you're playing like Grand Theft Auto and or if you're playing like Need for Speed or something like that. As soon as you complete the race, you're shown a recap of your race and everything you did. This is what people commonly refer to as an afterlife review. When people say, my life flashed before my eyes, it's then in third, that is that afterlife review. Just like in a video game, after you play the racing game and you finish the game and you're in third place, then the game automatically will show you, a clip of your race, et cetera, et cetera. And then what do? If you want to play the game again, then you restart it and you pick a different car or you pick a different character and then you play the game again. You see what I'm saying? Or if you don't want to play the game, then you take the game out of your console, your gaming console, and you put it in another game and you play another game. You see what I'm saying? So it's actually like as above, so below. That which we're experiencing is just a microcosm of the macrocosm. Okay, so imagine an IUOC, an individuated unit of consciousness, or which some people call spirit, existing within a void without a specific frame of reference and without a virtual reality simulation trainer. Okay, or just imagine you have 7 billion Tom likes to use the analogy of you having 7 billion people in the chat room. Okay, excuse me. You have the free will to communicate or not with any or all of them, but that's pretty much it. Within a chat room, you can chat with other people, but you cannot know anything about those you communicate with except for what they tell you, and most of the time it's all bullshit anyway. Because when you're dealing with people in, online or in a digital, communicating digitally, people don't really express who they really are. They express their surrogate or who they think they are. It's all ego driven. That's why these sites like these dating sites, a lot of these dating sites, they don't work out because most of the people that sign up for these dating sites subconsciously are ego driven. So when they make these profiles, their profiles are predicated and based upon who they think they are or who they would like to be. Even the pictures are, a lot of people Photoshop their pictures, or they'll take a picture from like 10 years ago and say that's a recent pic of them. It's all ego driven. That's why a lot of relationships that are with people that meet online don't work, because you're dealing with egos. You're dealing with your ego as well as that other person's ego, and who you think you are and who they think they are and who they think they might like or would be a companion to, and etc. And it's just all a hot mess. You know what I'm saying? So it's just like a lot of times we are ego driven, even at a subconscious level. All right. Okay. You see, the only person you really know is you, and most people don't even really know themselves, because rather than getting to know their higher self and getting to know why they're doing the things that they do, they pray to these deities like Yahweh and the demiurge and entities that aren't even alive and don't even give a fuck about them either way, and they base their life upon dedicating and channeling all of their energy to something outside of themselves. Okay, which is a waste of fucking time. I mean, it really is. I mean, and even and here again too is that, like, when it comes to church church is like it's a base, it's like a base fundamental way for people to exercise a certain spiritual energy, but it's gotten so perverted over the years that it basically doesn't serve any purpose whatsoever, unless you're an initiate and you can really use that energy to really tap into your higher mind. Okay, so now the only person you really can know is yourself. And by you, I mean a higher or a larger consciousness that chooses to incarnate into a virtual reality simulation to learn more about itself. See, that's the whole point of IULC incarnating in the first place, is to learn more about itself, which is to grow and decrease entropy and grow and evolve towards love, period. It's not to worship God. It's not to worship and raise children. You know, it's not to, you know what I mean, get into all these failed and disastrous relationships, which all that can help you evolve. But your life should not be dedicated to your children, towards your children. Your life should not be dedicated towards pleasing somebody else, or even pleasing a deity that doesn't give a shit about you either way. Okay, so, or a deity that utterly doesn't even like you and seeks to gain your energy to only persecute you. Okay, so really a lot of people are really missing the whole point of their incarnation, which is subsequently why they evolve at such a slow rate. Okay, so the whole purpose of a given simulation is to evolve, okay, and to evolve towards love. All right, no one can do anything to directly affect you, nor can you do anything that directly affects anyone else. All feedback is verbal or intellectual, but feedback only exists if you choose to listen or consider, therefore acting upon the knowledge of your ledger. Okay, becoming an acknowledger. All right, and you are basically an island, so to speak. You exist alone at the center of your personal universe in a huge chat room of billions, so to speak, on this specific flat plane net called Earth, with all of her subsequent pods of life separated by ice and whatever else. Okay, or how I've come to understand it, as an actor in a movie, with everyone being extras in your movie. Okay, and their purpose, unwittingly might I add, is to add to your own personal learning experience, even if they do not personally like you. Okay, and see, this is what I had to learn too. See, it doesn't matter if the people around you don't personally like you, because even at that juncture you can still learn from them. See, we have arrived at what Descartes understood existence to be when he came up with the phrase, "I think, therefore I am." This is a perfect description of the fundamental characteristic of an individuated unit of consciousness, a generator of interactive experience, who is aware in this quote-unquote void. This state represents the foundation of your out-of-body experience. Even through your out-of-body experience, that also takes place within this within a virtual reality, with some interaction provided by the larger consciousness system. So even if you have these out-of-body experiences, etc., lucid dreams, they are also provided by this larger consciousness system, computing a aspect of reality. You know, think of both dreams and, you know, these out-of-body experiences as an opportunity for some private tutoring from the larger consciousness system. And by the larger consciousness system, I am intending to mean a system of consciousness that is currently evolving through the process of incarnating and reincarnating in various simulations and interacting with various quote-unquote individuals in order to decrease its entropy. And even though we might seem separate, we are never truly separate due to the fact that we are all a part of one unique system of evolving consciousness. Okay, we are all a part of one unique system of evolving consciousness. And IUOC without a virtual reality has only has a small decision space and is driven by circumstance and logic to be very self-focused, which leads to self-centeredness, selfishness, fear, arrogance, and ego. You know what I'm saying? All these things flourish in such an environment, okay? Which is the perception that one has of oneself apart from the reality of who that one is at the being level, okay? Such an environment brings out or facilitates rather than hides the expression of your fear, arrogance, and ego, okay? Only those who can significantly reduce their fear, arrogance, and ego are able to be successful explorers of this non-physical matter reality and comprehend that which is non-physical, okay? And going out of body can be like looking behind the stage curtain. It can be educational if it generates humility and understanding, which is also, through it all, working towards love. And obviously, the larger consciousness system needs a better environment that will generate more and better opportunities for an IUOC to evolve, including inescapable feedback. So you have, so not only do simulations and virtual realities evolve, but there is steadily being, there's more simulations being created and being developed as a way to for the larger consciousness system to further evolve, which likewise in even a newly created simulation, it does evolve through individuated units of consciousness, us at the being level. Okay, so not only is this simulation evolving, which is one of the initial, which is one of the beginning simulations, but one of the first simulations, but it still evolves via the same process, via individuated units of consciousness evolving or logging onto or logging into a given simulation of virtual reality. All right, so consciousness at the fundamental level is real, and it is ongoing throughout lifetimes in various simulations. Okay, in various, and within those simulations you can incarnate into various, into different genders as well. Okay, now some people might ask, why would the larger consciousness system need to create all of these IUOCs in order for it to grow and evolve? Right? Valid question, right? See, in order for anything to grow or to gain an experience database, it must fragment or quote unquote give birth. All right, when a woman gives birth to a child, she is then able, you can look at it like that, she is then able at that point to learn more about herself through her child, whether male or female. And even if you give birth to a child, that child's parent might even say, hey, you know what, these characteristics that this child has are characteristics that you have. And by telling that woman that, she might say, oh, wow, I never really knew that. So she, there's an aspect of her learning vicariously through her children. And this is the same way. The microcosm is only a piece of the macrocosm. Okay. So when a woman gives birth to a child, she is then able to learn more about herself through her child, whether it be male or female. And this is how consciousness fundamentally works. Okay, within us all are dormant or potential traits that only have an opportunity to be expressed through the splitting or segmentation of our own selves. So you have this larger consciousness system that consists of all this probability, but in order for that probability to be actualized or for it to be dynamic, it must fragment itself. Okay, that way it can interact with itself and learn from itself. You see what I'm saying? in order to be taught, there must be a teacher. So there has to be that duality there, at least that duality. You know what I'm saying? And going forward into polarity, etc., etc. You see what I'm saying? So without the larger consciousness system taking an active part or only being limited to the experience within unconstrained virtual realities, like the ones you experience in dreams and out-of-body experiences with a loose rule set, you know, like even because even dreams and out-of-body experiences are virtual realities, okay? You know, and these are virtual realities that have a looser rule set, meaning you can, you know, if you're dreaming, you can fly. You know, hands on the clock are not visible per se, because that simulation that you're in via that your dream might have a looser rule set. So this aspect of time, the aspect of time might be a little looser. So if you notice, like if you ever had like a lucid dream or just dreams in general, try to look at like an analog clock, and you will notice that you won't be able to readily make out what time it is. You know what I'm saying? You won't be able to see those hands on the clock. You see what I'm saying? So, I mean, that's evidence right there. I mean, even for me, speaking me personally, I've done that and experienced that, you know, and that's evidence of being in a virtual reality trainer or a simulation with a looser rule set, or the aspect of time might be a little looser, okay, in relation to what we tend to view time as on this plane called Earth, okay? So, in a simulation with a looser rule set, evolving towards love is more of a slower process, okay? However, when the larger consciousness system uses these largely unconstrained playgrounds to provide you with challenges, and, you know, learning can also accelerate. You see what I'm saying? So in the dream world or an out-of-body experience environment, you tend to interact honestly at the being level, and thus get all sorts of educational content tossed at you to see what you choose to do with the information, okay? And if your fear, ego, belief, and expectations are sufficiently small, exploring the dream world and out-of-body experience realm can lead to excellent growth. However, if you possess stringent beliefs, or if you're really dogmatic and a religious zealot, and you have a strict or rigid view of what you deem to be reality, you will need a stricter rule set to maximize your growth, okay? In physical matter reality, as babies, we start out much like in IUOC without a virtual reality, i.e. exploring the external data field and struggling to figure out how to interpret all this data so as to produce consistency within our mind, your experience. And soon we learn that there is a wealth of interconnectedness in choice generated by these constraints, and also a wealth of feedback and interaction that challenges us to really grow up. In other words, all that physical interaction with various IUOCs and with the environment generates a much larger decision space. And it is the constraints of the virtual reality, or of a said virtual reality, that generates a larger decision space for its inhabitants, okay? Now, so what really do we make of all this? Are we to evolve together, meaning becoming cooperative with other species, and to become or generate one larger, more effective system, i.e. to become one with the animal life on this plane? And are we also at the same time to evolve the quality of our consciousness to produce or to become a more effective consciousness system, i.e. to become one with the larger consciousness system? Yeah. Becoming one with the larger consciousness system does not imply giving up any individuality, okay? It only appears that way to some because they see reality and its evolutionary possibilities through a lens of fear and ego, which creates separation, which thus creates individuality. You see, cooperation with one another does imply also setting up constraints like laws and such, but these constraints produce a much more useful and profitable experience for everybody, okay? Process, value, and functionality are optimized for individuals as well as the whole. And when I say individuals, I'm talking about, in quotes. All right. What is this cooperative grouping together? It's moving away from being self-focused, self-centered, selfish to being other-focused, moving away from fear, ego, belief, and toward love. Okay. It's defining that characteristic of love and moving forward towards it. It's not moving towards restriction or increasing entropy, all right, or drag. It is lowering entropy, all right. It's that's basically what it is. It is, or operating as a free will awareness unit within its own decision space, and that decision space increases, not decreases, with cooperation. It does what it does because of what it chooses to do, not because of what it is forced to do. Not being not being forced to make choices. It's always like, and that's the thing too with morality. A lot of times morality in relation to culture and society are things that are forced upon people, and that's not how you grow either. Things that you force people to do, they only do it, begrudgingly. They don't do it out of a pure intent. Okay. All right. And yes, we are free to make choices, all right, that lie within our own decision space, all right, as we please. Unfortunately, most of us can only imagine a freedom that is defined in terms of our fear and ego, because we define ourselves and our relationships with others in terms of our fear and ego, even if it's at a subconscious level. And let's just say you have a fear of being forced, coerced, or pressured because of, law enforcement, the cops, or an oppressive government, etc., etc. This force, coercion, and pressure might be all you know, and or all you think you know, and you make choices in life based upon these coercions, pressures, and fears. You will start to see very few options and develop a small decision space. Okay. This is of what is appeared to be, not what is, but what is appeared to be. This is not because you actually have very few decisions, but that it's how you view your reality if you do not interact within a community of love. Okay, based upon you view your reality as being confined and having a small decision space because of fear and ego. All right. Now, okay. What else do I really want to go into? When people say, because often people say, brother Prodigy, man, hey man, prove all this shit that you saying is real, man. And really, in a simulation, I know like the indoctrination that we're given to in school and how they train us to view reality, but it's nearly impossible to prove anything. Remember, we live in a statistical probable reality. Okay, all experience is subjective, meaning you can get a meaning from anything. All right, you can extrapolate a meaning from anything. You can extract a positive message or meaning from anything, from the worst case scenario. Okay, I mean anything. All experience is subjective, and all corroboration is also personal and subjective. Period. One can always imagine enough uncertainty to eliminate proof of almost any fact, and that's important. Okay, remember that one can always imagine enough uncertainty to eliminate proof of almost any fact. Okay, like let's just say your age. Okay, your mom, where you live, etc., etc. You getting specifically to this, right? The only thing that you really have that can document where you were born is a piece of paper. Okay, the first hand experience, first hand knowledge is that nurse that delivered you, but where is she at? You see what I'm saying? I mean, it's just that, like, we can say we have proof of various things, but when you really analyze it, it's not beyond a shadow of a doubt. That paper could have been fraudulent. Anybody can print up some documents. Anybody can Photoshop something. You know, is your mom really your mom? Maybe, what if she was lying the whole time? How would you be able to prove that? How would you be able to prove that? Were you watching your mom give birth to you? No. So I mean, really, like, when it comes to ourselves, there's little that we can even put the title of proving on. Okay, I'm saying we can prove on. You know what I mean? So I mean, but that's just living in a probabilistic reality. In that a lot of things that we think we know, we really don't know. I mean, you could have been adopted. Were you adopted? I mean, was the birth certificate fake? Was it faked? Did your parents lie to you? I mean, you really don't know. I mean, like, there's a lot of things that we think we know, but we really cannot prove. That's because we live in a statistical probabilistic reality. You see what I'm saying? And when talking about like science, science only seeks conclusive, repeatable, and consistent evidence. Proof is a word used precisely in logic and math. However, it's frequently used by lawyers, closed-minded skeptics, quote-unquote true believers, and other demagogues as a tool of obfuscation. But really, the word proof is not used by scientists of any type. Science and rationality require no proof. Okay, and remember that. They require only good quality evidence. Okay, we're talking about evidence versus proof here. Evidence accepts some measure of uncertainty. In most cases, the scientific value of good quality evidence is based on a subjective assessment of trust and on statistical significance. Okay? So, basically, one general truth is really any position driven by fear, ego, and belief will leave you looking like an uninformed fool to those at the next higher level of consciousness evolution. Okay, thus, if you feel arrogant and superior about being better informed and more highly evolved than the uninformed, closed-minded skeptic, you know, your this smug arrogance will make you look like an uninformed fool to those a level ahead of you in the consciousness quality game. You see what I'm saying? So it's you have to really think about that. You have to really think about that and really question the things that you think you really know. All right. So, that's pretty much all I really wanted to say. That's pretty much all I really wanted to say. Is there anything else? Let me just recap. Let me just recap, okay? Who are we? Okay, just recap with some quick notes, right? Who are we? We are an individuated unit of consciousness, an IUOC playing a total immersion virtual reality game wherein our avatars make choices and receive consequences for their actions. And our, you know, your actions, my actions, we receive consequences for them. And we appear to have physical bodies and exist in physical space. Okay. And consciousness is playing a role through an avatar. Okay. However, IUOCs are already a portion of the larger consciousness system and are surrogates or are an element for the larger consciousness system to play through. And this virtual reality that we find ourselves in can help with the evolution of consciousness outside of this virtual reality. And with the progressive transformation of being, increasing your quality of consciousness, which is decreasing your own entropy, that is what you are required to do. And you will keep coming back, and back until you do so.
which is a never-ending process. But you can degenerate into random bits of information, okay? And that would be quote unquote death, or the second death, quote unquote. All right. And you also have the evolution of the avatar and its genetics and biology, with each race of avatars manifesting their most probable genetic structures. And these two processes run concurrent with one another. Remember, evolution of consciousness occurs beyond and outside of your avatar. This is good news, though. Excuse me. And wouldn't you want the evolution of consciousness to be outside of your training program? What good if your evolution happened on simply a physical level, and if after you and you only had one shot at it, and after you died physically, that was it? Wouldn't that be fucked up? If you were just born here one time, if you just had only one life and you were just born, went through life, got a bullshit job, caught hell and died, that would be hell. That really would be fucked up. I mean, that's why people like you should embrace incarnation and embrace the idea of you learning cumulatively. You know what I'm saying? You don't just put somebody in kindergarten and then after they complete kindergarten, then you kill their ass. What's the point in that? No, you learning is cumulative. You start at kindergarten and then you first, second, third, and you work all your way up. And then you can keep going as far as you want to. You can keep going. You can keep learning as far as you want to. You can go to school your entire life if you really want to. You know what I'm saying? So, yeah, just look at it that way. You know what I'm saying? So, yeah, our avatars receive data. This data is interpreted by consciousness as information, which is data comprehended by a conscious observer, which is data received by a player in the game, which is converted into information by consciousness, which resides outside of the simulation. Okay. Now, it seems that we do have free will, because our free will, again, I'm speaking in relation to the free will skeptics who say we don't have free will, like your Calvinists and, you know, those people. It seems that we do have free will because our free will is necessitated by our own very existence in a subjective virtual reality, even with this strict rule set. The only thing that the rule set enforces is data consistency. Like I said, you know, everything must remain consistent. If I go outside and I see a tree in my front yard, my daughter, when she goes outside, she must out of necessity be rendered that same tree. She must be rendered that same data stream, which says to her visual cortexes that there is a tree outside. You see what I'm saying? I can't see a tree in my front yard and then she go outside and see a damn car parked in there, you know what I'm saying? Like where that tree was supposed to be. You know, that's inconsistent, and that makes for a bad trainer. It makes for a bad virtual reality simulation. Okay? And it's not going to happen. All right? One's own free will awareness unit is self, lower s, within the virtual reality expressing the will of consciousness. Okay, so your free will awareness unit, your avatar, is your lower self within a virtual reality expressing the will of consciousness. Okay, being moved and driven and motivated by consciousness. Okay, this is a manifestation of consciousness outside of the virtual reality. You, as a free will awareness unit, your avatar, are the residual image of your digital self. Okay. It is a portion of consciousness confined to three-dimensional physical matter reality. While in these avatars, we are also influenced by our own perceived decision space or conscious knowledge of options, even if only consciously interpreted at a subconscious level. Meaning, okay, that's just a fancy way of saying your ego. It is your ego and your fear that dictate your decision space, period. All right, and how far you can go and what you can do in life. Now, other things can limit your decision space physically, like being locked up and, you know what I'm saying, things like that. But as far as you being in the quote-unquote free world, ego and fear pretty much dominates the average person's decision space, or their perceived decision space, let me say. Okay, so our IUOC, our individuated unit of consciousness, is our true self. a digital individuated consciousness as it resides on it's as it resides outside of this reality. Okay. And this consciousness has free will, and free will is necessary for consciousness. All right. You have a little and a big you. Your little you is your avatar, your free will awareness unit. Your big you is your higher self, which some people call God. You see what I'm saying? But it is both you. It's you. It's you're you know what I'm saying? When you look at 32 degrees Fahrenheit and 120 degrees Fahrenheit, they're both on the same scale. They're just different points on the same scale. But how do you really determine where cold ends and heat begins? Society tells you that bullshit, and you believe it. Period. So, from a you see, when you look at the larger consciousness system, this construct, it has free will, and you are one with it, not independent or separate from it. Okay? Because it's not even the fact that you came from it and you're going back to it. It's not even that either. It's the fact that you never were separate from the beginning. You're just in a simulation. Therefore, and due to the dullness of your third eye, your sixth sense, you can't perceive it. So you think somehow, you formulate in your mind through societal programming in your ego that somehow you are separate from this larger consciousness, from your IUOC, which you're really not. So there is no coming and going from anywhere. You are one with it. It's just that you are dulled down. Your senses are so dulled down that you can't even perceive it. Okay? So, from a historical database, the larger consciousness system selects an individual, quote unquote, or an individuated unit of consciousness, like John Doe, or out of a sequence of characters, then that has progressed through multiple lifetimes, and this larger consciousness system, the character becomes dynamic through this incarnation within the simulation. The free will awareness unit becomes dynamic through the consciousness making choices through the avatar within a simulation, rather. Okay, so let me say that again, so make sure that comes out right. So the free will awareness unit becomes dynamic when consciousness, which is the individuated unit of consciousness that exists outside of the simulation, is progressively controlling that avatar. Once that consciousness stops controlling that avatar, we call that physical death. Okay? And the system starts the process of rigor mortis, and it starts to degenerate, etc., etc. And then that free will awareness unit gets stored as data within that Super Mario Brothers game. Okay? You know what I'm saying? So even like these new gaming consoles, you can actually save, games, and you can actually save you know what I'm saying, certain lives that you've played in the characters that you played. You can actually save that to the hard drive or whatever. So similar principle. So that when that consciousness, quote unquote, separates from that avatar, then that avatar becomes a static model within the database of that simulation. That's why people can call themselves tapping into the Akashic records and querying this database. They query the database from within the simulation. So they're querying the database of that deceased ancestor within that database. And what they are, with the larger consciousness system, what the server computes to them is a static model of that person. And that, so your Aunt Jane died 100 years ago. So if someone queries that database, the Akashic records, and taps into your Aunt Jane, then they can ask Aunt Jane some questions, and Aunt Jane will say, yeah, back in the day, I did blah 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 blah. And the answer that Aunt Jane gives them would be based on probability and statistical analysis. What's the highest probability of what she might say if she was alive? But that stops. But Aunt Jane and her personality profile stops once, at the point of death. So you can even ask Aunt Jane, who lived 1,000 years ago, hey, Aunt Jane, what do you think of the new cell phone? And she will give you an answer based upon probability. Well, I never heard of a cell phone, but I'm sure it's a nice concept. You know what I'm saying? So it seems when people query the database, it seems like they're talking to a real person, or that Aunt Jane is really alive. But no, they're just talking to a static model that is giving them back feedback based upon a probability of what they might say if they were alive, but they're not. You know what I'm saying? Consciousness probably already reincarnated into another avatar or a couple other avatars. You see what I'm saying? So that's how the system works. Okay. Consciousness creates the structure. The structure defines the reality, and the reality creates the possibility for an interactive experience between subsets of consciousness. Okay. The quality of the subset of consciousness, and the structural bounds defining the reality together determine the available decision space and the nature of possible interactions. Okay? So, what else do I want to talk about? Now, when I talk about physical matter reality, which is our physical matter which is the reality that we call physical third density. Our physical matter reality is the reality that my body, your body lives in, and its properties and laws, which we call physics. Okay. Physical matter reality includes the material universe, this flat plane and all the pods that exist on it, and everything unknown and everything known and unknown that materially exists within them. Okay. And physical matter reality can be effectively and purposefully manipulated and is operationally visible, and is inhabited by beings that are sentient in relation to programmable realities, in relation to like deja vu. Deja vu is just an experience, or just your avatar catching the update in the matrix. Okay, so when you experience like a deja vu and you feel like you've done it before, you've been here before, or something seems familiar, it's basically them updating the programming in the simulation. Now, they can be updating anything, but it just so happens that you are able to catch it. Okay, you are able to catch the update. Okay, you are able to catch the update. Consciousness is able to catch the update of them updating the program, updating the simulation, whether they're changing the simulation, updating the program, or whether a tree, whether a species of animal needs to have their DNA updated because they might go extinct and we need them so they can't go extinct. So an update is created or patched in to make it to where their DNA is updated so they continue to survive on this plane, etc., etc. That's what basically deja vu is. But I think that's pretty much it. How am I doing on time? Hour and 23 minutes. Ooh. Yeah, let me go ahead and close this out. I have so many more notes. This isn't even a quarter of it, which is so crazy. Yeah, I just like to close this out. Once again, I apologize for such a delay in uploading an installment. And once again, shout out to all my subscribers, my family, friends, everybody that's been instrumental in helping me along my journey. And basically, this is just what what I've come to be realized to be truth. Okay, and your truth, my truth is my truth, your truth is your truth. But ultimately, if you can get something out of this information after I just sat here and talked for like an hour and a half almost, I hope you can get something from it. But once again, don't hesitate to like, subscribe, share it,
And I hope you all are doing really well, and keep your head up. I know times are hard. I know people are struggling financially. I'm struggling financially. So just don't lose sight. Okay, don't lose sight of what you incarnated down here to do. And within, even if you're catching hell, wherever you're at on this plane, just know that there is something to be gained out of your experience. Okay, and eliminate your fear. If you don't have any money, or if you're broke, or if you're struggling, try your best to eliminate your fear and your ego, your fear of loss and your ego. Because if you can eliminate your fear of loss and your ego, then you'll know, and you'll start to see, and you start to free your mind and say, hey, this matrix cannot take anything from me, or it cannot take anything from you if you don't have any fear of anything. And then everything that will proceed from then will subsequently be or lead to a learning experience for you. So once again, I am Brother Prodigy. Like, subscribe, share it with all your friends. That's about it. All right, y'all. Peace.